Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk TV. Lively talk about life, church, and church life. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill T-B, and I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, Dr. Kris T-B, and we're broadcasting from our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of America. Say good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk TV.
Kris and Bill T-B here today to talk about something we don't normally talk about. We're going to talk about strategy. In fact, we're talking about the 4 strategies that every growing church that we've ever studied over we've been in business for almost 40 years now, that we've done studies since the beginning for looking at growing churches and saying, what do they have in common?
Right.
And one of the things they have in common is that they all give attention to 4 core key strategies for growing the church. And those strategies are?
They are inviting.
Tell them.
Oh, yeah, I will tell y'all because he knows. They're inviting, connecting, discipling, and we have a disagreement about this. He calls it sending.
And Bill Eason called it sending.
That's
and
okay.
Wayne Cordero called it sending.
He's just pulling some ranks here. They're not getting
Historical.
History. I call it going
which isn't a bad term, to be fair.
It's just
not parallel with the others, which is why I go, We invite people. We invite people. We connect with people. We disciple people, but we don't go people.
Oh no! But get this. Listen to what you said. You said, "Wait a minute."
Yeah,
we invite people.
Uh-huh.
We connect with people.
Yeah.
We
disciple people. But we don't go people.
We go with people. If you can connect with people, you can go with them, which really is what Jesus told us to do. The reason I make the distinction is that when I started really working with this a number of years ago, I would say to churches I would say and send, and you know what? As I checked, they do a lot of sending. They send money here.
That's right.
They send money
there.
They
write checks.
They send money out there. And this really is, we're talking about here, a key strategy isn't sending money or whatever anywhere, shoes, clothes, anything. It's going.
Right.
We go.
And it's just sending missionaries into all the world and into the neighborhoods, which is really what we're focusing on.
We're going to get there.
All right, so I mean that's so whether you're going or sending, the bottom line is it's not about sending checks. Right. I totally agree with her, and it makes a lot of sense. Okay, but I like the parallelism of sending, so I'm not going to change that. But that's okay.
Speaking in ways that people will get it.
Yep, I understand.
Stop making excuses.
You know, one of the things we've done over the last 40 years, we've been in business for 40 years, looking at churches that are growing. Right. We've also looked at churches that are not growing, but we're looking specifically, we've looked at the churches that are growing and said, what do they have in common? What are they all doing? And the thing we found out is that all of them give real attention to these 4 strategies: the invite, connect, disciple, and send go. Go send. Whatever. Go send. Anyway.
Thank you for putting go first.
There you are. All right. So what this is all about is, how do we get people in? How do we connect them into the church, into Jesus Christ? Well, into Jesus Christ.
That's it.
How do we disciple them? How do we make disciples of them? And then how do we send them back out into the community, into the world, if you will, as neighborhood missionaries that essentially start the process all over again by inviting people, connecting people, discipling, sending, so.
Okay, well, no, I was just thinking that during COVID and after COVID, because we're after COVID, but in the immediate post-COVID,
AC,
I started
after COVID.
Yeah, we did.
BC and AC.
Lord have mercy. Anyways, I started asking churches and ministers, this is the perfect opportunity to really rethink what's been important in your church, but more than that, what are those 4 key strategies? What's at the core of your church? And now, people say, hey, we haven't recovered our numbers, we haven't done that. Well, you know what? By this point, you're not probably going to recover those numbers. You may not the people who are gone. Let me say it that way, because you're going to recover those numbers and grow,
but not with the same people.
Exactly.
2 years ago, Pew Research came out and said, stop. That the people who have quit the church and didn't come back, they're not coming back. 2 years ago.
Right.
I talked to the pastor just last week saying, well, we're trying to figure out how
Yeah,
to get people back in. They're not coming back.
That's right.
They're not.
Okay.
Move on.
Well,
Sorry.
same thing. I keep hearing that too. I know. I agree. And then the question always is, let's look at your 4 key strategies. Where are you? How are you connecting? How are you, or inviting, connecting, discipling, and going, go sending. So anyways, yeah, so we're bringing home that point because this is so dad blasted important.
It's foundational.
It is.
It's the bottom line.
Right.
In fact, when Billy Some introduced this, and really it wasn't Billy Some who introduced it,
No,
it was Wayne
right,
Cordero.
it was.
And then Billy Some picked it up and really chomped that banner. And then we wrote the Effective Staffing for Vital Churches, which is based on this model.
Right.
But the bottom line is when we looked at it, it was like if what you're doing in your church isn't in one of these 4 key strategies, you need to stop doing it because it's not helping grow your church. It's not making disciples. It's just doing other stuff.
Okay. So you've got a seminar, workshop coming up, right?
I got a conference coming up.
If you're watching it, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Can I finish?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we have it coming. We have an online workshop coming up, a conference coming up this week.
Yep.
If you're watching the same time next week.
Sorry, you probably missed
you
it.
missed that one, but there are in-person conferences going to happen in 2024.
There it is.
And there will probably be at least another
Yep.
redo of this conference virtually. So, take a look. The link is, of course, in the description, and you can take a look and get registered for whichever one happens to work for you. And
Yeah, so pretend like it's not coming, so you can go to this one.
that's right. Exactly. Whatever one's coming up next for
Go.
you. All right. So here's the deal. We want to talk, just kind of briefly talk about all 4 of these. If you put them in, I put the graphic up there for you to see. There's a graphic that divides a circle into 4 parts, and you can see that there. And there's the invite, connect, disciple, send. And the brilliant part of this is that, Pastor, you're responsible for all 4. In fact, Pastor, you're responsible for everything that happens in the church. Now, I want to say that being responsible doesn't mean you're in charge of doing, because if you're doing all this, you're going to not just burn out, you'll kill yourself. I mean, it really will. It's going to take you out. Yeah. The whole goal, of course, is to raise up someone who is really the key leader in the invite, we call it a fractal. And then in raising up someone, a quadrant, yeah, there.
Yeah.
And someone who is in charge, your key leader in connect. Their job is to help make sure people connect to the church and connect to the members, and then disciple, and then, of course, the go or send. So, so Pastor, you're working with 4 people, and each of them raise up 4 people.
And,
so,
and they don't have to be paid staff. In a larger church, in a larger church, you'll get to have paid staff for that.
Each of those positions should be a ministry position.
But even to begin with, you have one.
Right.
Usually, our hire is a steady musician or a youth pastor or something like that.
That's the
right?
norm.
Yeah.
But
so what we're saying here,
that's not the best way to do it.
No, right? It's to say, what do we need to shore up?
And
Where
almost
is that?
almost all churches, that's the connect fractal.
Right.
You need someone. Most churches get the odd visitor showing up now and again, but they can't hang on to them.
Right.
And that's the connect issue. And so first out of the gate, typically first hire, is someone who's in charge of the connection fractal or the connecting quadrant. That helps people make connections. A visitor comes and we want them to become a returning guest. And I use that language to differentiate. Visitor, someone who shows up, returning guest continues coming.
Good. So we're going to get to connect.
Right.
But
So
now,
let's start
with invite. Right.
And so every church will, there's 4 key strategies, but then every church will essentially create their own next level quadrant based on what they need. However, we know some models out there and they're working, and we want to share those with you. That these are the basics that get covered. And so in the invite quadrant, there's 4 jobs that we generally see.
Go ahead.
The first one is networking. And Pastor, that's primarily your job to begin with, okay? And in fact, Paul Borden wrote a book some years ago, but the data is incredibly helpful. Is that every growing church that he looked for some commonalities, and that every growing church pastor spent at least 50% of their time in the community with less than church people, not with church members, but with less than church people. So, Pastor, you're in charge of, or at least you need to be doing a lot of networking in the community. The next bit, of course, is marketing.
Right.
You know, there's marketing that needs to get done. Right now, one of the most effective ways of marketing is word of mouth marketing and social media marketing. If you do it right, those both work really well. Then there's culture creation. You know, you want to create an inviting culture in your congregation, getting your people inviting, help give them tools to invite with and so on. And there's the events. There's events out in the community that you can go to and leverage. And there's events that your church is putting on. How are you leveraging those events to bring new people into your sphere of influence? Now, it may not be to the worship service. We often talk that's like the front door. It still kind of is. But, you know, what you really want to have is be building relationships.
Right.
So there you are. All right.
Okay.
That's the invite fractal.
Okay.
Let's move into the connect.
Okay.
Once you got someone in the door, you have to
Connect them.
Yeah, go with that.
Connect with them.
Connect with them,
Just
absolutely.
Like you're going to go with them. So,
Right.
okay.
But there's more than connecting with them. That happens.
You have to connect them to other people.
Right.
And to God.
And to Jesus Christ.
Right, to
Exactly
Jesus
right.
Christ. Right. Okay. So, but let's start with the beginning. You've got to have fellowship and you've got to do onboarding. How are you introducing them to people? How are you getting them connected into the church? How are you getting them involved in
How
the
are we getting them
church?
to know each other?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's I think more what I meant. So thank you for making that more explicit. Okay. So you're gonna do onboarding with them.
Which onboarding is typically the welcome to our church class. As we keep saying, don't call it a member class, because if you call it member class, people say, well,
You'll scare them.
I have to become a member to go to that class. No, we want to introduce you. Come in, introductions or introduction to, or getting started,
Learn
or
more.
learn more,
I like getting
whatever.
started myself, yeah.
Pizza with the pastor.
Right.
Pizza, yeah, that's right. Pizza with the pastor. Is another good way of doing it. Anyway, so it's onboarding, helping them figure out who you are as a church.
Get started.
Yeah,
Okay.
right, exactly.
Right. Okay. So fellowship. I had just put fellowship in with onboarding, but fellowship. How do people get together? Do they get together? Don't they get together? We were with the church not too long ago, and asked about doing a fellowship lunch to get together afterwards. They were meeting a new pastor, and so it was, hey, do lunch, and they said, well, we don't do lunches.
We don't do lunches.
Okay, and then they told us, well, the reason they don't do lunches is because the last time only 5 people showed up, and they were just staunch on not going. And immediately, what I think you were thinking, the same thing I was thinking was, do you not like each other? No wonder y'all are in the trouble you're in.
They were in a nosedive, and they're worse off now
fast.
because they just essentially said we don't fellowship with each other. They didn't say we don't like each other. They just don't want to spend time with each other. And if they don't spend time with each other, they're not going to spend time with new visitors.
Well, and they didn't do any hospitality at all. I mean, there wasn't even like coffee time or anything. Okay, so we're moving right along.
So fellowship, and how do we connect members with new folks?
Okay, so I know, following the circle, there's the yellow part, but I want to come to that one last.
Okay, all right.
So the third is member care. How do we take care of members? Which really comes down to taking care of one another again, right?
Right.
And so...
but that's the pastor's job.
Well, that's where I was just fixing to go. It is not the pastor's job.
Of course it's the pastor's job. It's called pastoral care.
You don't want my lecture on how we got to pastoral care. It was a huge mistake and wasn't really there until something around the mid-1900s.
Pastoral care means taking care of the pastor.
Thank you. Exactly.
Child care is taking care of the child. Pet care is taking care of the pet. How is it that pastoral care is taking care of someone else? Pastoral care is taking care of the pastor. Member care is taking care of the members. And who takes care of the members?
The members.
Exactly.
It's member care.
I was just looking at this today. Acts 2, 42 to 47. You read that passage, the members took care of each other. They met together. They hung out together. Acts 6, 1 to 3.
There it is. I love that too.
The food pantry, debacle. The members went to the pastor and said, you got to fix it. And the pastor says, no. Your job, let us give you the tools. We'll tell you how to do it, but you're going to fix it.
Well, what did they say? Our job is to teach and pray.
That's right.
And literally, I love that. I so love that. One of my favorite scriptures.
All right. And then Ephesians 4, 11 to 13, which says that the role of, or the job of the paid staff, pastors, preachers, evangelists, teachers, etc. Their job is to equip the saints, the members, to do the work of the church. In other words, member care, among other things. So member care is done by members. Okay, and so that is that part of the quadrant
Right.
raising up people
Right.
who connect. Because, I mean, that's the key part of connecting with each other, is taking care of each other.
Right.
So, all right.
Okay. So worship. The fourth quadrant is worship, and I love it being there because it really is about connecting, and people connect together in there. But lest we forget God in all of this, and so very clearly, worship isn't just to go in there and see people and sing some songs and hear some prayers and repeat some stuff. It really is about. Well, yeah, that's blah, blah. Oh, okay. Anyways, it is about connecting with God
And connecting with each other. That's what it's the ecclesia.
Right.
It's both. We're
Those who
connecting.
are
We're connecting
called out.
horizontal, and we're connecting vertically. That's the beauty of the cross. It's always a reminder that there's both and. That worship is about that. So it is about connecting.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's where the worship quadrant is. That's where you have your worship leaders, your worship band. Of course, we talked about the 4 in the middle, and there's 4 on the outside. Guess what? If you drew a line out to the worship, you'd have 4 in worship and 4 in fellowship.
Repeats.
And it goes. That's why it's called a fractal, because it's a repeating pattern.
Okay, and this is the great part. People are always saying, well, we're so small, we can't do this. It's like, wait, this is what's really cool. You only have to start with 4 people and the leader, like the pastor, whoever's heading you up, right? So you don't have a pastor, okay, denominational folks, this is where you lend, if you're denominational, right, where you lend guidance to them. You're pulling together, they're checking in with you. Pastor, that's what you do. You meet with those 4 individually
members, right?
And
Team
as
leaders.
a team,
Right.
because you want everything to be coordinated together. So,
And
then as you get more people, then you can you start simple, and then you can become larger and more complex.
And you don't have to add 4 at a time. So your connect key leader, they're on the core team, and the first thing maybe they hire or get done is they bring in a worship leader, someone who leads the worship, and that's part of that core fractal, and et cetera, et cetera. So it goes from there. All right, so we got 2 more fractals we want to talk about. 2 more.
We do, but I do want to say here, that's really when you start to need a consultant. Right, because a consultant can see a bigger, unless you are a strategist and you're great with strategy and you go to the workshop and you know what you're doing, you want to be careful when you start to get down to the particulars.
Yep.
Okay,
all right.
go.
No argument there.
All right.
All right. So the third quadrant, fractal, is the disciple. And again, the core strategy here is to make disciples. The problem with disciple making in the church is we have failed. We have relied on Christian education, there's nothing wrong with Christian education in theory, because we all need education. We need to know the stories of the Bible. We need to know how to read the Bible. We need to know who God is, Jesus is. It might be helpful to know the difference between Adam and Adam's house cat and Hezekiah, and et cetera, so that we know who the players are. So when the pastor says, we're talking, reading from the letters of Paul this morning, we know who Paul is, et cetera. Christian education is important for educating us. But in terms of making disciples, it fails, continues to fail, and has failed. It is not a disciple-making process. So this fractal is not called Christian education for a reason. It's called disciple. It's called we're making disciples of Jesus Christ, and how we do that is really based on how we create this fractal piece or this quadrant piece.
Okay, so I have a lot to say about this, and I don't have time to say it. So, but so much so that I teach a course in this for Phillips Seminary, so you can check that out, y'all. You can think of it in a couple different ways. We tend to think about Christian ed, so I'm going to build a little bridge there in terms of ages. So you get, you get preschool, and then elementary, and then youth, and then you get adults. So we can.
And it used to be that's how you divided that fractal.
Right.
That the four parts of disciple was little ones, nursery, elementary, youth, but that. All that does is it perpetuates Christian education.
Well, exactly. And then I'm going to take a youth one because I was a youth pastor, years ago. So when you think about youth in that way, then you think about Sunday school, you think about midweek, you think about retreats, and you think about
camp. or something.
Well, I was thinking within the church, you think about having fun, things like sleep-ins or
Sleepovers.
whatever they're no,
Lock-ins.
that's wrong.
Lock-ins.
Lock-ins,
There we
yeah.
are. Yeah,
It's been that
those
long.
things, yeah.
Right. So that's how I thought of it, and I didn't draw circles, but I drew out lines and everything, right? Graphing in a different way. Now, how I think of this is the journey from being a pre-Christian to a missionary, right? And also then when we talk about missionaries, I'm going back to what you talked about, neighborhood missionary, that we're not talking, for many of us, we think missionary, we send them overseas or maybe out to Appalachia or somebody else down on the borders. We're talking about
mission trips.
Or mission trips.
Right.
Yeah, but we're talking about being a missionary in your own neighborhood or on the block, like on our block.
With your neighbors,
street,
with your coworkers, with your friends,
and
relatives,
and your relatives, and
all that stuff.
right, okay. So now as I think about that, we've got people at every age that are pre-Christian. How do we move youth from being pre-Christian to Christian adults? Because we get adults now in there that are pre-Christian,
That's right?
And so people who've not yet taken Jesus as their Lord and Savior, you can be, and then you can become a Christian, right? Or you become a Christian when you're baptized, and that's where we've really screwed up with Christian ed. We leave them in the baptistry, right? Or we baptize children, our children are our babies, and we just say, hey, they're there, and then we get them to where they can have a profession of faith, and now, boom, they're really a Christian, or a kind of, we might say, a disciple. So the way I prefer to do this is one of two ways. I either take and do it age-wise, so the 4 age stages, and then for each one I'm looking, what are we doing with pre-Christians there? What are we doing there?
Let's talk about the 4 quadrants to begin with.
Right.
So we got pre-Christian.
Pre-Christian.
Then we got Christian.
Christian.
Then disciple.
Disciple.
And then missionary.
And then a missionary.
Okay.
So a pre-Christian is someone
who has not made a profession of faith yet.
Right.
So that would be kids, maybe.
Right. Yeah, kids are, definitely.
Okay, preschool and,
right.
and elementary.
Right.
And there's our youth.
And youth.
And adults.
And adults.
And how you help a pre-Christian become a Christian is different.
For
based
each
on,
one.
Yeah, that's right. You do different things with pre-Christian if it's an adult.
Right.
You got to kind of bring that up a little faster and et cetera.
Right. Okay, that's right.
Okay,
and then we have.
And then you get Christian.
Christians.
Okay,
so now they've been baptized, but we want them. And usually that's in our head. Maybe it's in our heart. But what we really want to get is down into our spirit. We want to grow spiritually. We want to grow in prayer. We want to, just.
So we're teaching the spiritual disciplines and of course continue the Christian ed process.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Because that always goes on. But it's about helping them become more of a believer,
right?
Or more firm of a believer,
right.
Understanding why they believe, and et cetera, as well as becoming more and more a solid church member.
Right. Right, of course, because you're living out your faith in all arenas of your life.
Right. Okay, so then the third is disciple.
It's a disciple. You become a disciple, and again, you're still going to keep deepening. This is where you have like a different kind of accountability partner. You would have a spiritual director, a coach.
This is where your behaviors really begin to change.
Big time.
Right. As a Christian, you're still in learning stages, and hopefully you're taking on some habits and whatnot, but you may not, your personality, if you will, has not made that switch. You're still kind of stuck with one foot in the flesh, so to speak. And discipling is moving us into more and more a disciple kind of behavior. All right, so we have different, again, it's different for a little one from a big one to an adult. Same deal. Okay?
Of course.
And then, of course, finally is the missionary.
The missionary. And so missionaries are out in their neighborhood. Missionaries are, I'm trying to remember where missionaries are. I mean, they're in their neighborhoods. They're talking about their faith.
They've become ambassadors of Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Which is what Paul calls them.
Right.
It's not a missionary necessarily, and maybe it is.
Right.
Maybe for some people it is. They suddenly go, I'm going to Mexico, or I'm going to the Sudan, or wherever.
Right.
But for most of us, we just need to figure out how to go across the street.
Right. Well, and that's really where we get to the go quadrant.
Which we're going to get there in a minute. But this
go ahead. You got more to say about that.
The missionary is about preparing them to do that. Teaching them things like evangelism, teaching them relational evangelism and whatnot.
Right.
And so we're preparing them to get ready to go out. If you go to be a missionary in a foreign land, you first thing you do is you go through some major training, learn the language, learn the customs and all that. And so the same thing would be here, is learning how to share the faith in culturally relevant ways.
So really, as you're saying that, it makes me think that what we're doing in discipling is really preparing your heart and opening.
The missionary piece.
Right, the missionary,
Right,
I'm sorry,
okay,
in
yeah.
discipling there, missionary quadrant of the discipling. I mean, really what we're doing is saying, how can we prepare you to make some thoughts or some decisions to really want to go out? And it may be then, like with training, churches aren't the end all be alls. If you want to be a missionary, then I'm gonna refer you, right, or go with you to talk to somebody who's doing missionary kind of work, right?
Overseas kind of thing.
Overseas, or maybe it may be domestic. Like I said, there's a lot of mission going on in the United States.
We're talking another level than being the missionary to your neighbors.
Right, exactly.
Right, okay, so we need to jump into the other piece.
Okay, so yeah, so you're preparing people's, like being able to get to, wow, what am I supposed to be doing? And that's really, to me, where discipling is going on. What am I supposed to be doing with my life? Like, right, to be in ministry doesn't mean that you are that you are a pastor, right, or a minister, a senior minister, or a program leader, or anything else. Whatever job you have is a ministry, is a vocation, and disciples are looking for that. And then it's giving the support in the go quadrant that allows them to do that best.
All right. So the go quadrant, the send quadrant is all about how are we missionaries and how are we missional. And so in that quadrant includes whatever we're doing with world missions, whatever we're doing with global missions, whether it's sending money or supporting missionaries, however that is, but being a part of the global movement for Jesus Christ. The second is the community outreach, and those are the mission projects you're doing, at home. You're doing your food pantry, or you're feeding the homeless, or whatever you're doing.
Spend the night in a shelter,
right? Or getting school supplies for the school. It's taking that and not doing suffering relief for the sake of suffering relief, because that's not our job. Our job is to take suffering relief and use that to make disciples.
Right.
How do we get our backpack blessing that we do every year or every week, as the case may be?
Yeah.
How do we make disciples out of it? How are we missional? How are we sharing the gospel in those cases?
Right.
And of course, then there's the whole how do we get you working in the community?
Right.
What tools are we giving you as a neighborhood missionary to be missional in your neighborhood? And servant evangelism, which is yet another tool. And we are almost out of time. We need to wrap this up. But I just want to say that there's 4 quadrants, and from those 4 quadrants, everything the church does can be mapped out. And no matter how big you are or how small you are, this is a scalable organizational model as well as a scalable strategic plan.
Yeah.
And so if you have not signed up, registered for the key strategies, the 4 key strategies for church growth, you need to get to it. The link is down below. I hope I'll see you on Thursday or at one of the other events.
It's going to change your church. I absolutely promise you it will change your life. It will change the way you do ministry. If it didn't, we wouldn't do it. We are sold out. We started a church with this model. I say converted churches, but we have. Right. We've
helped churches
and even churches we've pastored in the past. We've used this model. It is amazing. It will change. And if you want to be effective, become sustainable, you need to be at this workshop and learn more.
All right. Hey, good to see you. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week. Bye-bye.